Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren. We are invigorated. We are excited because we just spent the last week in Miami, Florida, which was so great, especially for all of you who live in DC or kind of anywhere right now. It's gross. It's disgusting. It's sunny one day. It's snowing the next. And so it's been so nice to get some sun rays. So maybe we look a little tanner. I don't know. It was a good time. I enjoyed it.
I know. If anything, we got a tan. We obviously did stories and we got to talk to a bunch of members. We got to be in the extended press pool of President Trump, which was pretty cool because I don't think either one of us had been in for any of Trump's speeches or press conferences yet since we cover Congress, as you all know. But if anything, we did get at least one shade tanner, which was so nice and
So
needed.
needed. And
Yes.
I think it was really cool too because we weren't staying, we were covering the lawmakers while they were at the Trump National Doral Hotel. And as people know, Trump's hotels are lavish, they are large. This one was very Florida coded. It was very nice. And I had actually gone to this retreat last year. And so for me, this was really exciting because last year I was new. I didn't really understand what was going on. It was so daunting for my first experience as a Congress reporter to be at this retreat. And so now, having been in Congress reporting now for a couple of years, coming back to this retreat, it was kind of a fun little full circle moment. I was like, it's so fun to see how far you've come. And I think it's really interesting too, because when I went last year, Republicans were fresh off of 2024. So every
Need to
Republican was
win.
there. Yes, they were like, we are ready. We have the trifecta. Let's go. And then this year, it definitely was a lot more muted. There weren't a lot of lawmakers there. I would say, I think around like 105 of the 218 members that Republicans have right now
Give or
were
take.
there. Yeah, like they were there and they were excited. Don't get me wrong. The lawmakers that were there were having a good time. They were chatting with reporters. They seemed ready to go for 2026. But I think that they all are very apprehensive that what they really need to hone in on is their central 2026 message. And so I think, Lauren, why don't you talk a little bit about what kind of we uncovered there?
Yeah, well, first of all, I feel like both of us talked about this a lot. It's really cool to see them in a relaxed setting. It's sunny, it's nice out. They're not on Capitol Hill in business professional clothes. So I feel like you got a lot more of the more intimate conversations with these lawmakers and like the interviews were very relaxed. Like we were sitting outside in the sun. So it was just a good refresh and we got to hear what they're excited about, which like you said, I think that they are not as amped up as they were last year, but they still do have priorities that they want to get done. I know that a lot of them are pushing for a second reconciliation bill after the big beautiful bill was passed last year because I mean trifecta is not promised to them come November, and so a lot of them are like we want to get as much done as possible in these next few months, and the closer that it gets to the election the less that we're going to be able to do because there are people that have tough seats. There's a lot of rankings changing that are solid Republican seats that are moving to likely Republican. There's just a lot of moving parts right now. And so if they want to get anything done that's relatively big, it needs to be done now. But messaging wise, we did a story that talked about how they really need to focus and hone in on affordability. I know that House Conference Chair Lisa McClain is huge on that. I've talked to her multiple times where she's been like, the way to go and the way to win messaging is to talk about the economy. People care about how much groceries are, how much gas is, how much all of those things are that are affecting everyday Americans. And that's what a winning message is across the board in any election because that holds weight all the time. And so I think that they were really honing in on focusing in on how they can put their messaging towards affordability, even if they do think that prices have been coming down. If people are not feeling the effects of inflation as much, they still want to keep messaging on affordability because it's a winning message all the time.
I think also the problem that Republicans kind of got the firsthand look at, though, on this retreat was that while they may be ready to go and moving forward on affordability, President Trump is not. Not that President Trump doesn't want affordability, but he is very much messaging on this war in Iran. He is messaging on the Save America Act. And when he came and he spoke to lawmakers on Monday last week, he talked about affordability a little. He talked about the fact that we've been bringing costs down. But as you mentioned, you can say that. But if people are still struggling and if people can't afford healthcare premiums, if they can't afford to go to the grocery store, if they can't, they have to put off surgeries because they can't afford it. Like that is stuff that despite how much lawmakers yap about it, if they're not personally feeling it, it's not going to work. And that can get even more eroded when President Trump is speaking before the body itself and then having a press conference where all he's talking about is Iran and the SAVE Act and pushing that this voter ID bill should be the number one priority. That was one of the big headlines that came out of this retreat, was that he basically told Republicans, even if it takes you 6 months, even if it takes you the rest of the year, I want you to pass the Save America Act. And that's kind of a setback for Republicans who want to see that second reconciliation bill, who want to see the farm bill pass and want to see NDAA, the defense bill pass, or FISA, this intelligence
Mhm.
surveillance bill that needs to pass. And people have tried to shove things into those bills. It's hardly ever worked. Clean bills are really the way to go around here. And when he's saying that he wants to get this bill at the forefront of the agenda, that's going to be really difficult for members who are in those competitive districts who want to have as much legislative priorities on things like healthcare and affordability and the cost of living under their tool belts. So that way they can go to their constituents and individually target and say, this is what I did for you guys. This is what we're doing for everyone. But if all that we're hearing right now is kind of this foreign affairs and this voter ID bill, which has gotten a little complicated for people who really care about domestic issues and for members who ran on domestic issues only, that's why this retreat, I think, kind of it helped them because they were all together. They were able to sit down by committee, talk about their priorities. But I think that what was broadcasted to the reporters, what was broadcasted to the world, was that I don't think Republicans are truly in sync about what they want to message on in 2026. I think a lot of them have a good idea of the message that they want for individual priorities. I don't think anyone is really out there sprouting different ideas on affordability. But if you have a president talking about foreign affairs and you have the House talking about domestic affairs, that kind of disconnect is just not going to work. But to the House Republican credit, Speaker Johnson said, look, we're all on the same page here. Like, everybody wants the SAVE Act, everybody wants affordability, and they can say that. But again, to voters who are outside of DC, outside of the Beltway, they are going to need to see some coalescence around one issue if Republicans want to keep the trifecta.
Yeah. And I mean, I do think that some Republicans are a bit confused as they focus on domestic issues because President Trump really campaigned both of his campaigns on being, or all three of his campaigns on being America first. And so when he is honing in on these foreign affairs, I do think that a lot of the party agrees with him and like they think that what he's doing in Iran is great. But I think that a lot of them are confused because they're like, I thought we were focusing on domestic issues, which is where the party is really messaging, or like House Republicans are really messaging on domestic issues, which is what they campaigned for him on, whereas he is really messaging on those foreign affairs issues. And so I think that there's just like a little bit lost in translation there, even if they do agree with everything he's saying on the SAVE Act and everything he's saying in Iran. It's just kind of like give some, take some. I also think that the president, as he has said, prices have come down, oil prices have come down. He's like, oh, I fixed this and I'm going to move on. And like you said, like if Americans are still putting off surgeries or still having trouble putting food on the table, regardless of if prices are low and the president did bring those down, if they're not feeling that, then you can't stop messaging on it. I know that one big thing that Republicans want to focus on is the tax returns from the Big Beautiful Bill. People are going to start feeling the effects of the Big Beautiful Bill, like no tax on tips. And then whenever they get their tax returns and they're much higher than usual because of the Big Beautiful Bill, because it starts when tax season starts on these like no tax on tip stuff. These people are going to have a lot more money in their pocket. And I know that Lisa McClain and Chairman Richard Hudson told both of us that it's just a matter of connecting those dots, that people have a bigger tax return because they did the one big beautiful bill. But I mean, in turn, you also have Medicaid work requirements or other Medicaid stuff or the ACA premium tax credits that didn't get extended. So I do think that premiums are going to be going up, which is going to be hard for them to message on that they're bringing prices down or putting more money in people's pockets when premiums are also going up at the same time.
Yeah, and Chairman Hudson, who runs the National Republican Congressional Committee, he had told me in our interview that kind of as you said, that connecting those dots is key. And he admitted that Republicans are not the best at messaging. They got one reconciliation bill done. And Richard Hudson kind of joked with me. He was like, if we did nothing for the rest of the year, like that would be fine because we have this giant bill that we've done and we've done a lot. So we can go to voters and be like, we promised to do this. Here's how we did it. That whole promises made, promises kept slogan that Republicans have really done. But the problem with that he admitted, and that a lot of Republicans have admitted, is that, it's called the one big beautiful bill, because that's what Trump called it, right? But nobody really knows what that is. On face value, you have no idea what that is. You're like, is it healthcare focused? Is it economy? Is it immigration? Like you have no idea. And Chairman Hudson had said the problem is that there's so much in this bill. Like people in his own district didn't know that like school choice was in there. They didn't know that no tax on tips was in there, even though Republicans have been trying hard to message it. As you mentioned, the Medicaid work requirements, they're estimating it's going to be almost $1 trillion in cuts over 10 years to that program. That's something that really scares a lot of people, and Democrats have done a really great job of messaging on it.
Mhm.
Democrats also are not the best at messaging. It's not like one party here has the trifecta on that. Both have shown that they are not the best. But it's how you can get that message across to people. And Democrats are really good on social media. They're really good at getting into those grassroots voters that can spread the word for them. Republicans haven't always had that momentum behind them. And so what Chairman Hudson said that he gave in his presentation to the members down in Miami was, you need to go to your district and you need to keep it simple and keep it small. This is what I did for you guys. This is how our district is impacted. This is how our state is impacted. And then if they have questions about other overarching things, always bring it back to the district because those are your voters. For the House, for presidential race, that's different. Even for Senate, that's different. For the House, there are 435 of them. There are 435 districts, all that care about different things. And so if you as a member are going there sprouting national headlines, maybe your voter who lives on Main Street isn't really going to understand what's going on because to them their groceries are still expensive and they still think they're getting taxed on their tips. So like as you said, what Chairwoman McLean said, like when they get those tax returns back and they're like, "Whoa, like I have so much money now." That is like a true indication of, "Oh, well people in Congress said they were going to do this for us and they did." And so if Republicans can do that and ignore all the other stuff, history still is against them. That was kind of a big thing that they talked about in this
Mhm.
retreat too, was that they acknowledged that history was against them. They acknowledged that they want to defy history and that House Republicans have been defying history since they got the trifecta, is what the speaker has said. And so they are not operating as if they're going to lose. And that's what Chairman Hudson said. He was like, people are acting like this race is over, and it's not. We haven't won it, but we
Mhm.
haven't lost it either. And so if people start giving up now, then you might as well just throw in the towel months before.
Yeah. I also just think in general, the economy is harder to message on. Whenever I think about this, I think back to whenever I was a server back in 2022. I think that it's Republicans have been really easy, or really not easy, really good at messaging and breaking things down to be super simple. We saw that in 2024. They won 2024 on closing the borders and not allowing transgender people in male or female sports. They won on like issues that they broke down to the most simple level, whereas the economy isn't that simple. Like in 2022, whenever I was waiting tables, I knew that Democrats were messaging on being pro-choice and abortion rights and women's rights, and that Republicans were messaging on closing the border, how Biden has opened up the border, and like I said, trans people in sports. I would have not known when I got my tax return, whenever I was serving and not working in politics, that my return came from a bill passed in Congress. So I just think
Well,
that
because who would? Like if you're not paying
exactly.
attention to that, like you wouldn't know. And that's the thing is like a lot of everyday people are smarter than we give them credit for,
Mhm.
obviously, but and especially lawmakers, but it is breaking it down into the simple everyday things. Like if you're impacted by your everyday life by these accomplishments, like you wouldn't know unless you were paying attention. But that's the thing is that they have to break through that wall and be like, "Hey, you got your tax returns? That was us."
Yeah. And I think that the economy is just harder. Like it's easy to be like, oh, I'm running to bring down prices, make homes more affordable, but it's harder to break through those more intricate things like taxes. I think that a lot of Americans really don't know the ins and outs of taxes and tax returns. I
I certainly
certainly
don't.
don't. Um, and so I just think it's harder. Like it truly is harder. So if they are going to defy these historical trends, then they're gonna have to break through on these things, and it'll be interesting to see if they do. I think that it is getting progressively harder. We're seeing a lot of nonpartisan reports that are moving a lot of seats more left as the year goes on. Like we have really not seen any seats move further right. Every seat tends to be trending more blue, even very Republican seats. So I do think that the battle is getting more and more uphill. It'll be interesting to see like how big or small these margins are come November.
I think also one thing that Republicans have to be cautious about is this big push for a second reconciliation bill. I mean, thinking back to last year when I was at the retreat, that was like gung ho, we did it, high five. And they barely left with a plan. It wasn't even a concept of a plan. It was just like, yeah, we like want one. Like it was very just like it was very broad. They didn't have a blueprint for reconciliation, number one. And it took months to get that. Then, they passed it, but then it took a couple months in the Senate, and they had to come back to the House. And that took 7 months. By the time they started in Doral to the signing of the bill, that was 7 months. It was on July 4th of last year. This year, the retreat was in March and the midterms are in November. And they've already gotten something from the president saying, hey, don't do anything else but the SAVE Act. He even was like, I won't sign anything unless it's the SAVE Act. Some members think that he's just being Trump and being hyperbolic and he will actually sign it, which, like, probably he would. But that is quite a threat to be like, I am not going to sign anything until you get your stuff done. And for people in the House, it's not really their problem. It's the Senate's problem. It's both Republicans and Democrats in the Senate who have to deal with this bill. And they're already dealing with a DHS shutdown. Like there's just so much going on. And so for Trump to continue to just push the SAVE Act when Republicans in the Senate have said, look, this is just like not going to happen.
Mhm.
That is quite a gamble for both the president and for the House to rely on the Senate passing this bill to save them. And that's not doable for a midterm where you're already projected to lose as many as 14 seats. Like that's just not helpful. And so that's why a lot of them are like, well, let's do a second reconciliation bill. Like let's get more wins on the board. Like let's notch some sticks or whatever. But like when you think about it, it took so long last time. You barely have that time now. And like your top tax writer, Jason Smith from Ways and Means Committee, literally told reporters point blank period at the retreat. He was like, I would love to do one. It's never going to happen. And then when we followed up and we kind of chased after him down under the palm trees, we were like, well, why? And he's like, well, because I know the members. We have a narrow margin. It's smaller than it was last year when we passed it. Last year was a 3-seat margin. This year it's a one. And two people voted against it last year. And that was Thomas Massie and Brian Fitzpatrick. So like he was like, ask them. If they're going to vote for it, great. But like Thomas Massie's never going to vote for that. He's said it repeatedly. History has proven he will not. That's already your 1-seat
Especially,
margin. You're done.
especially because for the policies that they are looking on and putting into this bills, like housing and stuff like that, they haven't found offsets for those. So there's no way they're getting
They
someone like
haven't even
Thomas
found an
Massie.
agreement because the
And
Senate and the House also can't agree on a housing deal. They can't really agree on healthcare. We saw that at the end of last year. Like, there's no agreement. So not only do they not have offsets, but they don't even have like a cross-chamber agreement on what they want to do. And you're already, halfway into March. You're going to be getting closer and closer to more primaries. We just had a few, like we've talked about in other episodes. Like, it just, time is not on their side. And I think a lot of them are admitting that. But, like, what else can they do? They can't sit up there and be like, yeah, we're screwed. Like they can't
yeah.
do that because that's like, like Hudson said, like we can't act as if the fight's already over. But I think that they need to start being a little bit more realistic just from top down.
Well, I also think that something you have to think about is a reconciliation bill does not bode well for multiple years. Obamacare was slammed for years before it was celebrated. I mean, there are still people that slam Obamacare, do not get me wrong, but it is definitely more highly thought of now than when it was passed. Same with Inflation Reduction Act, bipartisan infrastructure law. Like all of these bills, it is so easy to attack them. Like you saw how fast Democrats were to attack the big beautiful bill. They started attacking it the second that any blueprint started getting laid out. And so if this blueprint, it's March. Let's say 7 months from March now is right up to November. I know that this is supposed to be smaller if they do make one. So it could be a somewhat quicker turnaround. But even then, like Democrats are going to have a very cohesive message to be able to message against this bill. And like, I think that that is going to be very tough going into November. I do get that, like, if they already think that there is a trend moving towards losing the majority, they want to get as much done as possible. But I don't think a second reconciliation bill necessarily would help them just because reconciliation bills don't typically bode well in the months prior with polling. We saw that with the Big Beautiful Bill. I'm sure that the Big Beautiful Bill will pull a little bit better following tax season just because of these tax returns, etc. But it pulled very poorly in the first few months, which we saw that rebrand to the working families tax credit. Like these bills just don't do well in the first few months. And election day is what, like 8, 9 months out. And I just think that will be so hard for them.
I think also that's a good point because, and that also is why Republicans have to go into their districts and really message and kind of ignore all the national noise because you're right, the bill was not doing well when it was in its inception. It got passed and immediately it was just messaging on Republicans are cutting Medicaid. And so they had to spend the last year almost trying to tell people that's not what they did. And both sides have cohesive arguments on what that cut to Medicaid looks like. Democrats have one way of saying it, Republicans have another way of spinning it. So somewhere in the middle is where voters will have to decide which party they believe. But the problem is that they had to spend so much time doing that now they don't even have the time to now go and talk about the tax cuts, which is why they are doing this rebrand because they spent all this time defending this Medicaid train that now they have to go in and actually talk about the things that are positive. And so when people are starting to get their tax returns, people are going to be like, "Oh, that's so great." But like, why? And then there needs to be a Republican over their shoulder being like, "Well, because we did the working families tax cut." And like if the members are too busy in Congress fighting amongst themselves or trying to get the SAVE Act passed when a lot of states already do voter ID. Like there's just a lot going on where Republicans are really choosing to die on this hill. And President Trump saying that they should didn't really help the House either. Especially like I said earlier, like it's not on them right now, unless they want to try to pass it again to like a must pass bill. But then that could mean that fails. So just going into a midterm season, it's already dicey. You are under a microscope for every legislative step that you take. And I think that this second reconciliation package, they've tried to argue that Democrats are clearly not going to help them with anything anyway, so this would be the way to get anything done. But again, like you can get rid of the Democrats, you still got to deal with your own conference, and as they have shown, it's just not going to work. So I hope that they, get something on their radar soon because we are heading into more and more primaries where some of these members' tenures depend on it.
Yeah. I also think it's important to note that when the big beautiful bill was passed last year, first of all, there was the members were so energized because they just had a major win in 2024. Right now, we are trending towards them losing the House, possibly the Senate. We are in the middle of a DHS shutdown. We had a record long shutdown just a few months ago. We're in conflict
We're at
with,
war.
yeah, we are in conflict with Iran. Like there is so much more going on that Republicans are going to have to message and like get their what they believe to the American people that I don't know when this time will come in. They had all the time in the world last year, whereas this year, like I'm not sure where this time is coming from.
Yeah, no, they're gonna have to pull it out of somewhere. I'm not really sure. But as you know, Speaker Johnson made a good point at the retreat. He was like, people have underestimated us. They thought that we couldn't pass things. And yes, he's had like 7 or 8 rule failures under his speakership. And that is important to note. But he has also pulled some wins out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And that is impressive for a speaker that has such a narrow majority. And so I think that completely counting out Republicans doing well this cycle would be, a mistake. But it also would be a mistake, I think, for Republicans to just assume that because they have the heart and the spirit that they're going to be able to defy history once again, when just like numbers and times is not on their side. So we'll be watching.
And record retirements, which is huge going into a
Oh,
midterm year.
that could be a
But
whole other
that's a whole,
episode.
yes. But we will be following Reconciliation 2.0, their messaging, midterms, all of the above. But that's a wrap for Capital Conversations this week with Rachel and Lauren.
And as always, make sure to like and subscribe, follow us. Y'all know the drill, and read at WashingtonExaminer.com.